Hello everyone, my name is Pixlriffs and welcome back to the Minecraft Survival Guide. I hope you guys are having a good day. We're back here in the Minecraft Survival Guide world and today we are going to head out to the Ski Village project. It's been too long. This was supposed to be my winter project, but I've got very distracted by bees and the addition of the stuff that's happened in 1.15.2, but now I think it's probably time to head back. It is overdue that we get started over there, and I have honestly been kind of procrastinating on that project because we have to do something huge over there, and today is the day we get started on that. I have a ton of shulker boxes of stone, building materials, and dirt as well. We are going to head over there, and we are going to make a start on building a mountain. Welcome back to the Ski Village project, which last time we saw it was in the process of having the town area here mapped out, and we still have a lot of work to do on that, but I really think it's going to be nice to get started on some of this stuff once we have the context of a mountain range over here in the background. And you can't see it right now, but I did actually build up a pillar of roughly where I wanted one of the peaks of the mountain to be. It's up here, and that is really quite the height, but this mountain range is going to be quite large. And unfortunately, as is the case with a lot of these projects, it's going to take a lot of time and a lot of effort, and so you won't be seeing the end of it in today's video, because I'm recording this video, as I often do, the day before it's going to come out, so I don't miss any developments in the Minecraft community, and so I don't miss any snapshots that might come out and things like that, and new versions, new bug fixes, that kind of stuff. But this is really a project that is going to take us a little while, so you will see it develop over the next few videos. But today we're going to get started on the theory and the practice of how you build a mountain in Minecraft. This is our first major terraforming project, and it is going to be pretty spectacular once it is done. I think the thing to take away from this is we are not just going to build one large mountain, because for a start, that doesn't necessarily provide a huge amount of stuff for a ski resort to set up around. You know, if you just have one mountain, there's likely to be only one or two routes down from it that can be skied upon, and mountains don't typically form one at a time. You know, there are occasional, volcanoes and things like that, which are an individual mountain on its own, but so much more often you find that there are mountain ranges. There are different peaks in a set of ranges that allow you to have all of these different routes down the mountain, and we can do a lot more in terms of the dynamic of the landscape we're presenting here if we basically create a bunch of mountains instead of just one. So I think the thing we're going to do really, aside from having this column set up here to signify that's where the peak of this mountain is, we need to figure out where a few more are going to go, which is why I've brought so many materials with me today. Aside from the fact that we're going to build up the sides of the mountains, we will definitely have to build up a few more peaks and stuff as well. So I think a little bit further back here, this is the one that I want to be a lot more visible, and kind of the main route down into the ski resort from the mountains is going to be coming from this peak here, but I think we probably want to build one further back. I think this one here, this kind of like little hill, it's a little hill in kind of contrast to the mountain peak that we've already built there. Hello, we've got a little Arctic fox over here with something in its mouth. I think it's killed a rabbit or something like that. That looks like a rabbit hide to me. Anyway, we are going to build up an area up here, which is going to be another peak slightly behind that one from the perspective of the ski resort, and we will probably dot a few others around here as well, just so everything can kind of slope down towards the ski resort when we start building it. I recommend, if you are doing something this big in your worlds, especially in survival, if you are working on something as large as a mountain range, you definitely want to start doing stuff like this in stages. Don't expect to turn up and build an entire mountain range within a day. That's really not going to happen. You will need to pace yourself with projects like this, especially if, unlike me, you are somebody who can't dedicate a huge amount of time to Minecraft every day, because this is my full-time job. I'm able to put a lot more time and effort into these projects than the average player is going to be. So you'll probably want to have a little bit of time planned out so you don't get burnt out on a project to work on this stuff individually. I would also say that you don't want to go all the way up to build height with the peaks of these mountains. In fact, we want to keep a few of them with a significant amount of headroom. There are going to be different peaks at different heights in this mountain range. This is already much higher than any of the terrain that has generated around here, so I think it's a safe bet to stop this one here, and we will maybe dot a few more of these pillars around, which are going to be the peaks of these mountains that we will eventually build up to from around the outside. But I'm going to go and find a bed because I really don't want it to snow around around here while I'm working on this. So let's take a look at these two mountain peak heights from the, more or less the gateway to the mountains from the resort town, and you can kind of see that the perspective is working on them here. That one there seems to be roughly as tall, but I think it's just because it's a little bit further away. That one there is actually a lot higher, and we can potentially move in a few of them. What we want to do is kind of cluster them around so that each of them is sort of looking down on this central area, and so this is the natural area in which the ski route is going to present itself. I think we'll probably have one over here behind this little outcropping, and hopefully we'll be able to find a way to work this hill right here into the range of mountains, because anything that we can avoid building because it's already been built by Minecraft's terrain generation is going to be an advantage. Likewise, these hills over here can probably use a little bit of work terraforming them to make them look like they fit in with what we're going to be building here, which is going to be a lot of stone, probably some patches of dirt, andesite, gravel, cobblestone, that kind of stuff, but primarily built out of stone. And I think we need to terraform some of these to fit in with that. But remember, we're going to leave a little bit of space over here for houses and a sort of residential area, some nice lodges like the one we've already built, that kind of thing. So I think we'll probably build up 3 or 4 more peaks around the outside here. I'm going to spend a bit of time looking around, deciding where those should go. I'll see you guys once I've done that. Hey folks, welcome back. So I've started to plot out where the peaks are going to be of our mountains here, and this is already looking like a lot of work, but hopefully we're going to do our best to break it down into bite-sized chunks and just actions that we can repeat over and over again to make it, if not less monotonous, then at least a little bit more manageable of a task, because we really have, we have a whole bunch of peaks that we want to hit here, and some of these will probably vary in height as we go, but it helps to establish these nice and early as guidelines to work towards, because the next thing we're going to be doing is starting to build up a few structures that are going to reach up towards these peaks in sort of like a wireframe. And the inspiration for this is coming a lot from my buddy FWhip's series. If you head over to his channel, youtube.com/FWhip, he has some fantastic tutorials on how to approach terraforming, how to build mountain ranges and stuff like that, along with a bunch of other amazing build tutorials, which I recommend you check out. A link to his channel will be in the description, and I'm following a little bit of his guidance here in the same way that I did for the castle I built over at Founder's Forge. Very much recommend you check him out. So what I was thinking of doing was starting to aim towards this peak first. It's the first one that we built up and is really going to form, I think, the center of our mountain range here. It's going to form at least the beginning of the long ski route that's going to bring people back down towards the resort. The idea being that they could take a lift up the mountain to that peak there and then follow some sort of route down that would vary in terms of its steepness, in terms of its, direction that it took, but eventually would make its way back down to roughly where the gateway to the resort is. So people are basically skiing back home every time they take on this route. Since skiing isn't really possible in Minecraft, of course, I am planning on putting another route down the mountain that is going to be possible to navigate by boat using a path made of ice. And I'm not quite sure how that's going to work out yet, because of course ice is only really available in block form. We don't have slabs of ice, so the slope is not really going to be very gradual. It's going to go down in stages, much in the same way that the Minecraft landscape does, but I feel like we can dress it up in a way that's going to make it look a little bit special and make it kind of fun for players to interact with. And that is really part of the reason that I built the ice farm that we have over there in the first place, because I want ice to be something you can interact with around here. We might even make it like a little skating rink, a kind of outdoor rink that people can skate on, that kind of thing, maybe. I don't know, we'll see. But for now, we really need to start working towards these peaks, and we need to figure out how steep these mountains are really going to be. Now, obviously, as you get closer to it, it's going to be a lot steeper as you get to the top of the peak there, and then we're going to have a gradual incline down. I'm not certain if I want to plan out that route first, or if I just want to work on the structures of the mountain. And this entire thing is going to be hollow. There's going to be a lot of dark area underneath it once we're done. We'll probably have to go over with a bunch of torches and light the place up, but I think eventually the mountain range here could be a really neat way of either concealing some farms or concealing storage for this area, because I really need to build a storage area somewhere around here at some point, and the mountains might be a good way to do it. But you know what, we're standing here, there is no time like the present. I think what we're going to do is start effectively building our way towards that peak using the stone I've brought with me. And this is the way I plan to work on the entire mountain, basically, is to build it up in this wireframe structure first, starting with a little bit of a kind of diagonal pillar, but we're not going to go in a straight diagonal because, of course, mountains generate in all sorts of strange ways. So there will be sections where we kind of go off course a little bit, and we can start to follow those, creating ridges of the mountains as we go. But I'm mostly going to make this out of stone, and then after a while, this is something I picked up from FWhip's tutorials as well, you're going to add in sections of dirt here and there, because a mountain is not entirely made of stone. There will be dirt that has built up over time, you know, rocks that have crushed down and stuff that is growing in this area that's actually going to be kind of important to leave areas of dirt around the outside. So we can build up some stuff like this and then continue on upwards with the stone. Remember, the peak we are aiming for up there it's somewhere in the 200s in terms of Y value, and we're only at Y90 right now, so we have a lot of work to do, and we're starting quite far out. So I'm trying not to build up too steep at first if I can help it. Remember that this is something that eventually people are going to ostensibly be able to ski down, so it's going to be a little bit difficult to make sure that we don't get too steep too quickly here. I think it's important, in order to make these things look organic, to not go in the same direction all of the time. You'll see that the bottom section here kind of follows the same path, but then here I've taken a bit of a twist in the opposite direction, and that will allow you to form some more natural ridges that you can follow as you build up even more of these wireframe components that lead towards the peak. Every so often I'll turn around and look back up at the peak so I can make sure I'm still headed in the right direction, but it's nice to build in these little switchbacks and variations as we go. Mountains in the real world are formed by a couple of different things. There is volcanic activity, where magma from the earth is pushed up through the stone, and it creates this kind of funnel that the magma eventually pours out of, and that's what a volcanic eruption ends up being. And then you have stuff like stone formations that have been giant to begin with and have worn down over time thanks to water being pushed up through them, and glaciers forming, which slowly move down the mountainside, eroding everything in their path. Now, this being a colder environment, it is more likely that glaciers were responsible for the formation of mountains here, so we kind of have to think a little bit like that and think about how the landscape would be eroded instead of having been built upon over time by lava being pushed out of the earth. And the way water would take a path down these mountains would end up being a little bit more organic feeling. But yeah, I think I'm going to start steepening the mountain a little bit here. And it's also kind of fun to go down the mountain again, just to fly down or hop down as you see fit, and take a look back at where you've come from and see how it's shaping up. And right now, this just looks like a weird wonky sculpture made out of stone, and it doesn't look like it's traveling all that far from that angle, but when you turn around and you look at it from this angle, you can really see the amount of stretch it's getting towards that summit. And I think this is going to be a good start. Once we have a few more wireframes in, we're going to have a better idea of exactly the shape this is taking. But if it seems too steep for now, that's okay, because we can always start to make it a little bit more shallow by building over the top of this once we have the whole thing in position. The main thing really is to get started on a project like this and then to augment it with more materials as you go. Another important thing to remember is that mountains don't have to be all up all the time. You'll have flat sections. You might even have some sections where, as it builds up to a peak, the mountain structure falls a little bit and then rises back again as it's heading towards the peak, so you don't have to worry about the entire thing reaching upwards all of the time. I built this little flat section of dirt and stone here just to cover a little bit of ground between us and the peak, because I was a little bit worried that we were going to reach the height of the peak before we actually reach this central spire that I have built out of cobblestone. And so it's kind of important to build in sections like this, both to give yourself a little bit of building leeway, but also to understand that the structure of a mountain is not necessarily all vertical. It doesn't have to be climbing 100% of the time, and we may even find a couple of places where it can dip back down again. And at this point, I think we've reached the point where we are close enough to this peak that we can probably call it good there. I don't necessarily want to go much higher than this, and we have flattened out a little bit at the top, but I feel like this is probably where the ski lift is going to stop, and we might have a sharper peak that we can build up on top of this a little bit sooner, because typically you're not going to be going all the way to the tip of a mountain in order to ski all the way back down it. There is going to be a flatter section towards the top where the ski lift ends, and then that's a staging area for you to get your skis on and continue back down the mountain. But this is our first of our many wireframes that are all going to be headed towards a central point over there. And even though we haven't met it with this one here, that's probably going to be a good place to focus on as we build up the rest of this mountain. Let's hop down and take a quick look at this from below, because as you see it from the gates of the ski resort over here, it really isn't going to look all that much like a formation of a mountain quite yet. But then if you look at it from the side over here, a different perspective will show you that this actually has a bit more of a mountain-like structure. The slope is more gradual than it appears when you are looking at it face on, and if we end up connecting a few of these, you will start to see a mountainside taking shape. So that's really the next stage, is to start building up a bunch more of these arms reaching out to hit the peak of the mountain up there, and I think the best way to illustrate that in progress is to do it in the form of a time-lapse. Welcome back, folks. I hope you enjoyed the time-lapse. I had to take a little bit of a break in real life, so I decided to end the time-lapse there and just give you guys an update on how this is all going. So these mountains are looking a little bit steep once again from this angle, but I have a feeling, like I said before, that the ski route is actually going to come down between these two mountains, between this larger one on the right and this smaller one here on the left. The one on the left also has this second mountain behind it over here from which another ski route could come down, so we're looking at maybe 2 or 3 different routes throughout the mountain here, which makes sense because ski resorts are going to have different routes depending on the skill level of the skiers or snowboarders or whoever happens to be out there, and you're going to find that there are steeper runs for some people who are more experienced. There are going to be more shallow runs for beginners, and I wanted this mountain range to kind of have a bit of variety in there. In terms of the scale of this, it's not perhaps going to look quite as realistic as you might expect because, of course, these things are having to be built inside of Minecraft, and the Minecraft scale, the fact that we don't really have more than 256 blocks of height to work with, and considering that most of the terrain around here starts at sea level. I'm just skis on the brain at this point, guys. Since most of the builds here are going to start at sea level, we only really have 192 blocks of height to work with, and you don't want to go all the way to build height with this stuff anyway. So you're looking at a slightly shorter thing, and so maybe the mountains don't look quite as realistic compared to the scale of the player. But when you look at it from the gate to the ski town now, you start to see where these mountains are going to be. And you'll notice that there are some sections where our initial paths up there look a little bit more random than some of the ones that I built in later, which follow a slightly more linear path. And that's kind of by design. I feel like this mountain is going to have a section outcropping from the top here and there, and that one there especially has a kind of like a steep section and then a flat section. These are going to be emphasized when we finish off the structure. So there are going to be outcroppings of bare rock where the snow wouldn't even have a chance to cling on because it's just going to slide down to the lower slopes. And out here especially, that section there isn't connecting up with the first one we built. In fact, it's actually kind of wrapping around the mountain, and that's the direction our skiers are going to come down, and then probably loop back around and come down through here to connect up with a route coming down from this slightly more shallow slope over here, and eventually just end up back at the foot of the mountain here. And of course, we can start to augment this here and there. We can start to build on top of it, make the lower slopes a little bit more shallow if we want to. These are just the foundation of the mountain. So like I said, this is really going to be a very large project. It's taken me about an hour's worth of work to do all of this, and I expect to put in another couple of hours on these wireframe sections of mountains today. I kind of want to do that off camera though, just so I have a chance to experiment with a few things and not worry too much about it being on a time lapse. So I'm going to cut away and do the rest of that, and when we come back we should hopefully have a few of these framed out, and I might even start working on connecting some of these lower spaces here and there so you can see the kind of style we're going to go with for some of these connections between the wireframe sections. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'll cut away once again, and I'll see you guys on the other side. And here we are enjoying the cozy fire inside this lovely winter lodge that we built a while ago with a view of the mountains outside in the background. The wireframes for these are more or less complete for now. I'll probably go through and add a little bit more to them here and there just to figure out how some of these are going to connect up and find out some contours of the terrain that we can kind of work into these, but I am more or less ready to start building up the terrain itself, which we're not going to do in today's episode. It's really more about framing out those mountains and figuring out exactly where some of this stuff is going to go and where we can have a little bit more variation. But I thought I would duck in here just so I'm not standing out in the cold, and so I'm not standing anywhere near caves where mobs could come up and get me, because I've actually brought my camera account along with me, and we can take a look at these things from the air. So this is the mountain range we are working with. The ski village is down here over on this side, and as we go through the gate over here on this side of town, we would end up heading towards this range of mountains, and obviously we're going to be able to do a little bit more with obscuring your view and only getting to see the mountains when it's kind of at its most dramatic. We can do a little bit more work to make this whole thing a little bit more interesting. But I like where these are at right now. We've got a few different peaks here. We've got 6 different peaks, possibly even 7 if we work in a couple more here and there, and I've got some fun ideas for each of these. Let's start over here on the left-hand side. This one is actually kind of the weirdest looking one for right now because I tried to make it a little bit more shallow, and it's only got 4 of these connecting strands, one sort of on each cardinal direction, just trying to make it a little bit more shallow than some of the other mountains so that this can be where the beginner slopes start out, the ones where people, if they're not too familiar with skiing, can at least cut their chops on this mountain over here. This little one here is actually going to be more of an aesthetic thing than something that you would actually ski down. It's a lot steeper than the others and is mainly there to kind of obscure your view of this side of the slope, because that side is actually where part of the main course of the main run is going to be. The main run is actually going to start up here next to the peak that we basically started out building to with our first little jaunt up the mountain here. We can have a section up here where the ski lift will drop you off, and then basically the route is going to start facing down the mountain this way. We're going to be able to ski down this section here. I say we're going to be able to ski. We won't be able to ski because it's Minecraft, but the idea is that skiers would be able to go down here. There would be a kind of hairpin turn almost, or at least like a shallower turn that they could take, maybe not a hairpin, and then come around the corner here to end up coming around this mountain on the right here and come out at the bottom of the slope there. So it's going to be a kind of, not quite a slalom course, but basically something that has a few twists and turns in it to make up for the fact that you wouldn't just be skiing straight down the side of one of these mountains, given how steep they are. The trail is going to be a little bit more winding than that. But to support that, we have these mountains at the back here. That steeper one is going to be probably the one that ends up being the highest peak of the lot and the one that is not really accessible to skiers. And then over here on this side, we have another mountain on the side here as well, and that's potentially going to provide a little bit of skiing action for people depending on how it interacts with the others. So really the point that I'm working towards here is figuring out how each of these mountains now intersects with each other, because obviously we've only got half of this mountain kind of wireframed out on this side, and I'm really happy with the shape of that one. Actually, I think it looks quite good. But then the other half around here is basically flat on that side, because I'm not sure quite where it's going to overlap with the other mountains that I've already built the structures of. And effectively what's going to happen is that we will start to build in these wireframes. They will start to show spaces where they overlap, and then, like I've already done with these two mountains over here, we will start to get areas where they can join, and we don't have to worry too much about the shapes of them. So this whole section of this mountain here, like this whole section that runs down and connects to the ground there, actually isn't going to be visible at all from the surface, because it's going to be underneath this large mountain at the back, you see? So each of these is going to overlap and interlace in different and interesting ways, which basically mean we're not going to have to do as much building as all that, especially since everything underneath this is going to be pretty much hollow. This mountain over here also has a couple of sections where it just tacks onto the side of the beginner slope mountain, and I like that a lot. I think it's a nice dynamic way of setting these things up, and while obviously these just look like giant, almost spiderweb type things right now, I honestly think this is going to be a really great foundation for starting this project. It's a little bit ugly looking right now, but once we start to fill in each of these sections of the mountain here, we're going to produce some really interesting shapes, and we're going to get to do a lot of really cool terraforming with these. But for now, I think I'm happier looking out the window at these mountains from the comfort of my little tundra lodge here, and I think that is where we're going to leave it for this episode. I hope you guys have enjoyed this look at getting started with creating your own mountains. It's going to be a long journey ahead of us, but I'm looking forward to it, and I hope you guys are as well. Don't forget to leave a like on this episode if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you want to see more. Don't forget to check out the F-Whip video that I left a link to in the comments as well. Let him know I sent you, and I will see you guys soon. Take care. Bye for now.